Hello all, myself Dr. Meenakshi Bhakre, working as the Assistant Professor and in charge HOD of Respiratory Medicine Department at Symbiosis Medical College for Women, Pune. COVID-19 impacted our lives very much. So now situation is we have to learn living with it. So today I will explain you about how you can do oxygen monitoring at home. What are other simple tests you can perform at home? What to do if you notice your oxygen level decreasing at home? And finally, how to keep your home well ventilated. When anyone from your family member suffer from COVID-19, then most of the time doctor advise home quarantine, that is home isolation. In this case, it is very important to monitor yourself and patient at home. Most important monitoring is oxygen monitoring. For this, we use pulse oximeter. What is pulse oximeter? As shown in picture, it is a clip-like device which is put on your finger or toes. It used to measure oxygen saturation in the body. That is how much of the hemoglobin in the body is carrying the oxygen. It is simple to use and it is non-invasive. Oxygen enters the lung and then it passed on into blood. Blood carries the oxygen to the various organs in our body. The main way oxygen is carried in our body is by means of hemoglobin, a component of the blood. Typically, more than 89% of your blood should be carrying oxygen. This is the oxygen saturation level needed to keep your cells and your body healthy. While having an oxygen saturation below this temporarily is not believed to cause damage, but repeat or consistent instance of lowered oxygen saturation level may be damaging. An oxygen saturation level of 95%, it is considered normal. For most healthy individuals, a level of 92% indicates deficiency in oxygen reaching tissue in the body. The pulse oximeter thus be able to tell you your oxygen saturation level along with your heart rate. Small beams of light pass through the blood in the finger measuring the amount of oxygen. It does this by measure in changes of light absorption in oxygenated or deoxygenated blood. This is painless process. You will keep the probe on for as long as needed to monitor your pulse and oxygen saturation. Monitoring physical activity capabilities, this will be during the extent of the exercise and during the recovery period. Once you have checked your oxygen saturation, the clip or a probe can be removed. As we can see in the picture, there are two values that are displayed along with graphical representation. First, the value displayed near to SpO2 percentage is your oxygen level, and the value that is displayed near PR BPM shows your pulse rate. Now we will see the reading of the pulse oximeter. Basically, the readings are measured in SpO2 and average reading will always lie between 95 to 99% and the acceptable range will be 93 to 100%. As mentioned above, oximetry will also give a pulse reading. This reading can be fairly accurate, and it is true that it provides results within a 2% difference either way of what is truly is. For example, if your reading was 82%, your true oxygen saturation level may be somewhere from 80 to 84%. However, the quality of waveform and assessment of the patient must be considered. Hence, always correlate your patient condition to the readings. Oxygen saturation level below 94%, it is always advisable to consult a doctor and know the cause of low level. Having cold feet and fingertips can give us a wrong reading. Also, if the patient is having nail polish on the nails, it may interrupt the process of evaluation of oxygen saturation.
Your remote monitoring COVID-19 diary. As you have symptoms of COVID-19, you or your carer has received a diary and a pulse oximeter. COVID-19 is a viral illness which for most people is mild, but for some it can quickly become serious. That's why we need you to monitor your breathing, your heart rate, and the level of oxygen in your blood. By recording these measurements in the diary provided, you can help your GP or 111 decide on the best treatment for you. A pulse oximeter monitors how fast your heart beats and the level of oxygen in your blood to accurately assess your progress with COVID-19. An ideal blood oxygen level is between 95 and 99%. An ideal heart rate is between 50 and 90. How to use a pulse oximeter. 1. Remove any nail polish or false nails and warm your hand if cold. 2. Rest for at least 5 minutes before taking your measurement. 3. Rest your hand on your chest at heart level and hold it still. 4. Switch on the pulse oximeter and place it on your middle or index finger. 5. The reading takes time to steady. Keep the pulse oximeter in place for at least a minute or longer if the reading is not stable. 6. Record the highest result once it has not changed for 5 seconds. 7. Identify each reading carefully. Write the information in the diary. Start writing from the baseline and record 3 times a day at the same times. For instance, when you would normally eat meals. Take extra measurements if you feel a change in your health.
Let's look into troubleshooting. First, let's talk about what causes the trouble. And when troubleshooting in the pulse oximeter, first we have to see the directions from the manufacturers of the device that you have purchased. We have to check that if batteries are placed or not. Second, make sure your device is turned on. Even after doing this, if you are not obtaining a reading, then check for your sensor. If you are not obtaining a reading, then check for your sensor cable. Warm your hands. Check for any grease or oil on your fingertip. Or it could be a low battery level of device. It can also be cause of low blood flow. There are many types of pulse oximeter as we can notice in the picture. There are fingertip and handheld pulse oximeter. These are most commonly used in ambulance or offices of the doctors or emergency setups or in any office or companies, and it can be used at home also for close monitoring of the patient. These pulse oximeters are usually made by different companies, and the slides on this page does not endorse or advise any company. All the pictures used above are only for the educational purpose. Now, let's see what all myths regarding pulse oximeter and oxygenation that we have encountered. First myth being you need oxygen if your SpO2 levels falls below 94% once. But the fact is that individuals with oxygen saturation in the range of 93 to 94% on a single reading then do not need to take high flow oxygen just to maintain or bring up their level to 98 to 99%. You would need close monitoring but may not need oxygen because often people tend to panic by seeing saturation levels below 95% right after putting on pulse oximeter. But let me break this for you. One should always wait for 60 seconds and then conclude the reading. And at least 3 readings should be taken to know the mean and actual value in order to correlate if your oxygen level showing below 94%. Sometimes you can see your oxygen level high and then eventually drops. Sometimes it starts from low values and then increases. This is why we have to sit and place our hands at resting position and check for the saturation for 3 times and then conclude. Using face mask, people think that it hampers the oxygenation. The prolonged use of medical mask can be uncomfortable. However, it does not lead to CO2 intoxication nor oxygen deficiency. While wearing a medical mask, make sure it fits properly and that it is tight enough to allow you to breathe normally. Always keep the fact in mind, do not reuse a disposable mask and always change it as soon as it gets dampened. Let's see about the other myths of oxygen therapy. Myth: oxygen means I can't be active. But the actual fact is, oxygen makes you feel less breathless and one can be more active on oxygen. Other myth is oxygen is addictive. My dear friends, oxygen is not an addictive substance or gas. It has no addictive properties and it is the fact. Another thing is people think that if you are put on oxygen then it is the end. But no, the fact is oxygen therapy helps you live more longer, makes you feel better and be more active and helps you to meet your day-to-day activities without any hindrance. Portable oxygen concentrators meet all the oxygen needs. Actual fact is these portable oxygen concentrators are not good for continuous flow or higher liter flow needs. Another myth is petroleum jelly is the best for nose dryness. But the fact is you should make sure that only water-based moisturizers are best for the nose dryness. Myth is one thinks that if they are on oxygen then they can't travel but the fact is they can travel. But it just needs extra precautions and planning. Also, people think that they can use a portable oxygen concentrator during their sleeping time. But no, fact is that oxygen concentrators don't provide enough oxygen during sleeping time. Also, oxygen causes fire, hence avoid. This is a myth some can have. No, oxygen is not a flammable gas. It supports a flame but does not cause fire by itself. Everyone will see the oxygen tubing on my face. But the fact is, there are many options in the oxygen delivering devices, including glasses. So, one should never step back because of this cause. There are some frequently asked questions. One of that is, how do I check my oxygen level at home without a pulse oximeter? If you do not have a portable finger pulse oximeter in your home, you can also learn how to assess signs and symptoms of low oxygen levels. Two classic signs of low oxygen level is a rapid heart rate and fast breathing rate. A normal heart rate is 60 to 100 beats per minute and a normal breathing rate is 12 to 20 breaths per minute. However, under conditions of low oxygen, your body responds by increasing your heart rate and speeding up your breathing rate. Another sign of low oxygen level is cyanosis or bluish color change on your lips, nose or fingertips. As your body loses oxygen, the blood cells in your body change color in your bloodstream to a dark blue, which can be seen from the outside of your skin if it is severe. Cyanosis is typically a late sign of low oxygen level and is considered a medical emergency. If you notice this bluish discoloration, you should immediately seek medical help. Another commonly asked question is, does smartwatch measures correct SpO2? Meanwhile, technology has been a boon to us. So not just pulse oximeter, but we now have a smartwatches which actually read the SpO2 measurement. But since we cannot comment on the accuracy, we should never consider this as an alternative for the actual medical device. Why I have said that it can't be accurate is because smartwatches measures blood oxygen level with other type of SpO2 measuring technique, which is different from the pulse oximeter. It is called reflectance pulse oximetry, which simply ensure light reflected instead of the light passing through our body. We have now seen first assessing of the patient, that is oxygen monitoring. Now second test can be used to assess the patient is a 6-minute walk test. First, let's know what is a 6-minute walk test. It is a submaximal exercise test which is used to assess the aerobic capacity and the endurance of the patient. During this test, you walk at your normal pace for 6 minutes. This test can be used to monitor your response to treatment for your heart, lung, and other problems. This test is commonly used for people with the pulmonary hypertension, interstitial lung disease, for patients with the pre-lung transplant evaluation, for most common lung diseases like COPD and asthma. Looking to why do we need this test, as seen in the slide, it is used to assess functional capacity of the lungs. It is very simple to perform at home with only minimal equipment, and best part is result can be self monitored and is most useful in preventing last minute calls. Also very helpful in post infection rehabilitation. Like I have mentioned, since it is very simple to perform at home, let's look into how do we do this test and how do we prepare ourselves for this test. So now first lesson is to how do we prepare ourselves for the test. First, always wear a lighter clothes which will make you feel comfortable to walk. And if you are using any walking aids like sticks, then you can use it even during the time of testing. Do not do the test on empty stomachs. Make sure you eat at least 1 hour prior and you are well hydrated. Along with that, make sure that you take our regular medications and do not skip them at any cost. You can take this test barefoot or you can wear a shoes that you are comfortable in. Why is it required to do this test? When a patient is at home and not under the watch of physician, we have to track and check the oxygen level while the patient is at rest or when on exertion or any physical activities. Let it be walking or running. In such cases, we suggest the patient to perform this test. So first we should check the saturation levels at rest, then perform the test, and even if the patient is on oxygen therapy, then make sure you keep them connected to the oxygen and check these saturation levels. Check the saturation level prior to the test. Make them walk on a plain surface for a 6 minutes and then check the saturation immediately after that last 6 minutes of walking. Compare the pre and post values. This can be done at least 2 to 3 times in a day to keep a track on the oxygen level of the patient, which is also helpful for rehabilitation purpose. All the patients undergoing COVID-19 care at home must check their oxygen level regularly because people with the low oxygen level sometimes don't experience any discomfort and show no symptoms. This condition is termed as happy hypoxia. So now let's learn how do we perform this test. Put on pulse oximeter on your index finger or middle finger and check your oxygen level. If it is above 95%, then you can take this test. Note down the saturation. Now walk for 6 minutes without taking a pause on a plain and even surface. After 6 minutes, if the oxygen level does not go down, you are considered as a healthy individual. Warning signs like if you feeling any giddiness, any severe leg pain, or severe breathlessness, then pause the test and resume if there is any time left. Also check if your saturation drops less than 85%, then please stop the test. After the completion of test, that is after 6 minutes of walking, immediately make sure you note down the saturation level. When you have stopped walking, like mentioned in the slide, the normal oxygen level is 95 to 100%, and the concerning blood oxygen level is 91% to 95%. And if you have low blood oxygen level, that is less than 90% of oxygen saturation, then you advised not to take the test and meet your concerned doctor. So, who shouldn't be taking this test? Patients suffering from asthma, patients suffering from long-term cardiac illness, or patient should not perform this test, as this test might increase the workload of the patient, and patient might experience fatigue, that is tiredness associated with other complications. Healthy people above 60 years can take the test for 3 minutes instead of 6 minutes. The test can help us detect the oxygen deficiency in an individual. Get them admitted to the hospital on time without any delay for further evaluation and treatment at the right time to make the patient stable and make them survive. If patient has undergone any recent surgery, then it is advised to not to perform the test within the week of surgery. Now let's look into to what do we do or how do we help the patient with low oxygen level at home. As it is advised to check your saturation every hour, as it helps to keep a track of the oxygenation. And if your oxygen levels are dropping down eventually, it is advised to sleep flat on your stomach, and this particular position is referred to called as proning. Proning is known as an very effective method to help and improve the patient's oxygenation. But even after proning, the patient's oxygen saturation does not pick up and continues to lower down, then the patient needs hospitalization or an immediate visit to the doctor. So, if you are at home and being treated at home, you know if your oxygen level dropping below 94%, you don't have to panic, but follow this position called proning for self-care. While in home isolation, you should keep these things in mind before going for self-proning. For proning, you need pillows. One should be below the neck, two below the chest through the upper thighs, and two below the shins. This is advised according to the Health Ministry. In details, we can see it in slide. As we can see, the first position is lying flat on your belly. Make sure you let down flat in this position at least for duration of 30 minutes and not more than that, as we see in the picture. Keep your head below the body level, but keep one pillow below your neck bone and the second pillow should be placed below your pelvis area, that is below your stomach, and should be free enough to let one hand pass below the pillow, and the third pillow should be below your feet. This technique has proven to be an effective measure for treating those patients with acute respiratory disease. Now, let's see the second position, that is lying on your right side. This also is to be carried out for a duration of 30 minutes and not more than that. Let's quickly see how this position is keeping one pillow below your head and keep the second pillow below your waist and keep the third pillow below between your legs. This is how the second position is. Now, let's quickly see what is the third position. This position is called sitting up position. This is also supposed to be carried out for a duration of 30 minutes. Place a pile of pillow against a wall. You can use 3 pillows and the rest in a slanted position on your back against the pillow. Let's quickly see what are the do's and don'ts for the proning. Avoid proning after an hour after meals. Maintain proning for only as many times as easily tolerable. Do not overdo that. One may prone for up to 16 hours a day in multiple cycles as felt comfortable. Pillow may be adjusted slightly to avoid pressure areas and for comfort. Keep track of any pressure source for injuries, especially around bony prominences. So, by lying in proning position, we can improve our lung oxygenation. We will constantly check the pulse oximeter reading and we can observe the saturation level shooting up when patient is proned. This will also improve and help in better breathing pattern of the patient. As we can see, there are semi-proning positions as well. We have discussed about 3 positions earlier. Here we can see the 4th and 5th position. Also quickly see why and who should avoid proning. Patient in conditions like pregnancy, deep vein thrombosis, which is treated in less than 48 hours, cardiac conditions like unstable angina or cardiac arrest, unstable spine patients or patients with femur or pelvic fracture. These all patients should avoid proning. Like mentioned earlier, keep switching between these three positions every 30 minutes and make yourself as much comfortable as possible. And do not prone yourself or the patient for more than 16 hours a day. And keep the room in which you are proning the patient should be well ventilated. And try breathing as much as fresh air possible. It helps in ventilation of the room, and also the air that is circulated inside the room will be pushed out and the new air flows in. The prone position is very important as it improves the ventilation and it keeps the alveoli open and makes it easy for breathing. Proning is required only when the patient feels difficult in breathing and if the saturation decreases below 94%. Also make sure that the regular monitoring of the saturation is also associated with monitoring of the other signs like temperature, blood pressure and sugar level in the body during home isolation period of the patient. And if you miss out on the low saturation level for hypoxia, which means compromised oxygen circulation in the body, this may lead to worsening of the complications or might create new complications. Timely proning and maintaining good ventilation at the right time could save many lives during the home treatment. The cautionary measures that I have already mentioned earlier, please avoid proning right after meals. Make sure the patient is proned only for 16 hours a day and not more than that. Pillow that we use for proning can be adjusted according to comfort level of the patient but should not be after the positions. Have a track of the pressure sources or the bed sources as it can lead to injuries or discomfort to the patient. If your oxygen level is maintaining above 94% with proning, then you should continue to do it. But if your oxygen level decreases beyond 94% in spite of proning, and if the patient is feeling any discomfort or increase in breathlessness or for showing any other symptoms, consult your doctor immediately and check if the patient needs hospitalization. So remember, all of you at this point, when you or your family member or your friends who are infected with COVID, we should make sure that self-monitoring and early warning signs, quickly seeking medical help is the most important thing to do. At same time, when you are taking care of a sick patients at home, then avoid getting infected by the patient. Hence, use all the precautionary measures to avoid infection. Keep the patient isolated in a room and make sure this is the first step that you are taking. There are some myths regarding proning also. If proning increasing my SpO2 above 94%, then I am okay now. There is no need of medicine now. Let me explain this. People always tend to skip out on medicines when they see their saturation level getting better over proning. But let's get this busted. Proning definitely helps in improving our oxygenation, but only when it is going hand to hand with medical drugs or medicine. As we know, COVID pneumonia is mostly affects our lower lobes of lungs. By proning, alveoli in this lower part of lungs get open up and it helps in more oxygenation of alveoli and by that mean increase in your SpO2. But this will not treat your underlying pneumonia. So, because our main aim is to eradicate the existing infection while making the patient symptomatically better, which ends both the treatment are important. So, never avoid medicine prescribed by the physician just by seeing your oxygenation improve, as the underlying cause still need to be treated. Besides proning, what are the other ways to improve oxygen levels while in home isolation? Deep breathing, yogic pranayam, ample access to fresh air, staying hydrated, eating iron rich foods, light exercises also help in improving oxygen level of patients, the health ministry suggests. Preventing COVID-19 infection, indoor ventilation plays a very key role as it prevents the spread of virus indoors. Natural ventilation means opening the doors, the windows of the house as it creates cross ventilation. The air gets exchanged frequently. Also, houses need to breathe. They should draw in fresh air and exhaust the stale air. In fact, some experts recommend that one half of the room air volume should be exchanged every hour. Encourage ventilation, of course, by opening the doors and windows. Let's see that the lab confirms regarding the infection spread with the rooms with more air and less air changes per hour. In case of low ventilation, that is 2.3 liters per second of outside air can cause 2.83% of infection per person per year. And in case of high ventilation, that is 6.6 liter per second of outside air can cause only 0.7% of infection per person per year. How can we achieve this high ventilation? When we keep our windows open, we are increasing our ventilation by 2.3 to 7.5 liters per second. And by keeping our doors open, we are increasing our ventilation by 3.6 liter per second. By keeping both windows and doors open, we are increasing our ventilation by 8.8 liters per second. This clearly says that ventilation plays a very important role in prevention of infection. Now, let's see the role of ventilation in safety against COVID-19 infection. While working in public spaces or buildings, we should always ensure a natural ventilation process. Especially in places like schools, for working in hospitals, we should make sure that we have right ventilation. Why do you think ventilation is very important? The first reason being it increases the rate of air exchange and ventilation by natural or mechanical ways. We can avoid the recirculation of air. The second being you have to make sure that the filters are properly cleaned and regularly maintained. By doing the above, we are preventing the infection at our level. And if you have air that recirculate from room to room at your workplace or in wards of hospitals or at your home, always keep the COVID patients in the rooms that have the ventilation from the outside and not on the inside, or use HEPA filter and fan to vent to outside. Don't exhaust into enclosed courtyards. Avoid facing into prevailing winds. What actually happens in ventilation? Actual room air flow is highly turbulent, non-linear, modulated by computational fluid dynamics. Reality is pocket of dead air and lack of air mixing. Heat sources, furniture, window helps in changes flows. Crowding and ventilation are two sides of same coin. So we will see that crowding measured by number of person per square foot and repeated CO2 concentration which should be above 1000 ppm, and ventilation is a volume of outside air per time which measures air changes per hour, filtration, direction and rate of exhausted to outside. So, how do we increase the ventilation in the room? Turn on the exhaust fan. While cooking or while bathing, make sure your vent is on and let the vent air outside. At least leave it on for an hours of time after use. Leave the vent on after have your guest over. Place a fan which would blow out the usual air. Keep it close to an open window blowing the air outside. But make sure you point the fans away from people. Also, while at home, instead of air conditioner, use of the ceiling fans may help to improve the flow inside the home with air without window open. So, if you ask that are fans useful, I would give big yes. Having fans like window, box and tower ones in front of window created more ventilation. The mechanism on which the fans work will help the air inside to blow out and the air outside blow in. In case you have a single fan, always keep the fan on the same direction in which the air is flowing from outside. We should never place the fans in such a manner the air filters from infected person to the others. We should never block a window that is needed for the fire escape in case of emergency. In what condition can we worsen the situation? When we keep the dampers and the windows closed in order to avoid the drafts. When we place the patients within the airflow path of COVID. We should always check for vents and exhaust fans not being blocked but wide open. We should make sure that we regularly clean the boards of the fans which recirculate the air from the patient to the clean environment. There are some commonly asked questions about the ventilation. First is, should I close my bathroom window due to SARS-CoV-2? Answer is, the decision to open or close a bathroom window depends on other aspects such as, first, is it the only provision to ventilate the bathroom? Second, is there also an extraction mechanically or naturally? Suppose the window is the only provision to ventilate. First, close the bathroom door, assuming that the outside air coming in through the window is free of COVID-19. The opening the window to its maximum is recommended. Then, the dilution of any contaminant is at the highest level. The concentration will hence be at the best. The concentration will hence be at the lowest level. When the person in the bathroom is infected with the coronavirus, there is a risk of spreading the virus to the rest of dwelling when there is an overpressure in the bathroom due to wind pressure. Nevertheless, the concentration is as low as possible in when the window is wide open. Suppose the bathroom has a passive duct or mechanical extraction. First, close the bathroom door. The air extracted through the passive duct or the mechanical system determines the pressure between bathroom and the adjacent part of the dwelling. It is always better to strive for under pressure to prevent the spreading of moisture. The same is valid in case of SARS-CoV-2. The dilution rate determines the concentration of the virus in the air, and hence it is advised to open the window as wide as possible. The other question is, what does SARS-CoV-2 teach us about building ventilation? Why should we care about it when there is a vaccine? This pandemic has pointed out the importance of aerosol transmission in the propagation of diseases, and more specifically respiratory diseases such as the flu. Even if the vaccine stops the COVID-19 pandemic, seasonal diseases like flu, colds, bronchiolitis, etc. will remain, and it will still important to limit their propagation indoor as their direct and indirect costs are huge. A well-performing ventilation system reduces the concentration of infected aerosol in the air, and thus the risk of becoming contaminated by breathing infected aerosols. This stresses the need to install well designed, well commissioned, and well maintained ventilation system in buildings. All the more in spaces where social distances are respected, and therefore when aerosol transmission is the main source of infection. Example, non-residential buildings. It highlights also the need to raise awareness among the public authorities, building professionals, building owners, and users on the crucial subjects of building ventilation. The other question is, how long should a room be ventilated after occupation to reduce the concentration of infectious aerosol? Let's assuming an infected person has occupied the room. The room should be ventilated until the concentration of infectious aerosol is decreased to an acceptable level before it is used again by other person. At the time of writing, there is, however, insufficient scientific knowledge to define what is an acceptable level. Still, it is possible to estimate how long a room should be ventilated to reduce the aerosol concentration down to a level relative to the initial concentration. Ventilation in most cases is mixing the air and diluting the contaminant. As a result, the concentration decreases exponentially when no further contaminant production is present and ventilation occurs with the uncontaminated air. Assuming complete mixing of air and negligible influence of setting and inactivation of infectious aerosols, the decay from the initial concentration depends on the product of the air change rate of a room and ventilation time. The air change rate expresses the rate at which a room volume is replaced by uncontaminated, typically outside air. Replacing the room volume with the same volume of outside air in a given time does not mean the room is completely clean after that time. So, in order to reduce the contaminant concentration to 1% of its initial concentration, a room should be ventilated for more than 9 hours at an air change rate of 0.5 air change per hour, or for about 1 hour and 10 minutes at an air change rate of 4 air change per hour. Can portable air cleaners prevent the spread of COVID-19 indoors? There are numerous technologies being heavily marketed to provide air cleaning during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Common among these are ionization, dry hydrogen peroxide, and chemical fogging disinfection. Some products on the market include combination of these technologies. These products generate ions, reactive oxidative species (ROS), which are marketed using many names, or chemicals into the air as part of the air cleaning process. People in spaces treated by these products are also exposed to these ions, ROS, or chemicals. While variations of these technologies have been around for decades, relative to other air cleaning or disinfection methods, they have a less documented track records when it comes to cleaning, disinfecting large and fast volume of moving air within heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, that is HVAC system, or even inside individual rooms. This does not necessarily imply the technologies do not work as advertised. However, in the absence of an established body of peer reviewed evidence showing proven efficacy and safety under assumed conditions, the technologies are still considered by many to be emerging. As with all emerging technologies, consumers are encouraged to exercise caution and to do their homework. Registration alone with the national or local authorities does not always imply product efficacy or safety. Consumers should research the technology, attempting to match any specific claim against the intended use of the product. Consumers should request testing data that quantitatively demonstrate a clear protective benefit and occupant safety under the condition consistent with the intended use. When considering air cleaning technologies that potentially or intentionally expose building occupants, the safety data should be applicable to all occupants, including those with the health conditions that could be aggravated by the air treatment. In transit spaces where average exposure to the public may be temporary, it is important to also consider occupational exposure for workers that must spend prolonged periods in the space. Preferably, the documented performance data under assumed conditions should be available from multiple sources, some of which should be independent third party sources. These are the basic precautionary measures that we can involve in order to improve. Basic ventilation, which ensures that no one new person in the home falls sick, and the other monitoring measures like oxygen saturation and pruning and 6 minutes walk test helps us to self evaluate our condition and also evaluate the patient. Let's be better and follow these measures and help ourselves as well as the society to fight against the pandemic, hoping that you would implement and teach other as well, making our country and the world a better place. Thank you.